Hi, I'm Steve James, and this is 30 Minutes, our community affairs program on Thunderbolt Radio and Digital. On this weekend's program, we take you back to October 1990, where the late Tennessee Governor Ned Ray McWherter delivered an address to a crowd of mostly educators at the Boling University Center ballroom on the UT Martin campus. The theme of the governor's address was 21st century education. Included in this program is the original 30 Minutes program introduction by Paul Tinkle. We hope you enjoy this 30 Minutes program.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Paul Tinkle, and welcome into WCMT's 30 Minutes. Our program today is Governor Ned McWherter's address to some 600 persons in the University Center ballroom last Monday night. The governor's address is to that of educators and what he wants to see done in his 21st century classroom program. The governor addresses mostly educators who were in the ballroom, but several politicians as well as interested persons who are genuinely concerned about the future of education here in Tennessee. And now Governor Ned McWherter.
It's good to be in Wheatley County, and it's good to see so many people from our neighboring communities here this afternoon. And the remarks I want to make this afternoon, Commissioner Smith has told you about the program. You observed the video. Since many of you are in this audience that I've known some of you all your life, you've known me most of my life, I would ask you to reflect back to the change that's taken place here in Northwest Tennessee. 10 years, 20 years. Some of us could reflect back 40 years or more. And as I make my brief remarks, think about your personal life. Those of you that moved here, why you came, why you located, maybe coming to this university, other job opportunities in this area. Those of you that grew up here and your parents live here and your grandparents live here, think about the different kinds of jobs and job opportunities. They're right here in our local communities that some of us would have never dreamed of 10, 15, 20 years ago. And that's what I want you to do tonight as we make remarks and look at the education program. And what was pointed out a few minutes ago in the video could be a history of some of our own lives here. Finishing school, working on the farm, working at the corner service station, working in the local community, making a living. And then, as was pointed out, we're entering a new age, ladies and gentlemen. There's a revolution of change taking place right here, right among us in Northwest Tennessee, and all over this state, all over this nation, and throughout this world. And this change will require the boys and girls today and those of tomorrow have a better and different type of education than some of us received when we were in school. You know, we made it. I start with a premise that I'm proud of the public education system in Tennessee. I'm proud of our schools and our home communities all over this state. I'm proud of university campuses like this in Dyersburg and others all across Tennessee. But we must understand, and the key word here is to understand, that in the future, all of the boys and girls that graduate from high school, hopefully they attend college for higher degrees or get some vocation in some of our technical or community colleges. But those that graduate tomorrow will not have the opportunity to take advantage of the new skills and the new job opportunities if they aren't properly educated with a good foundation of education. Think about that. Relate it to yourself personally. Now, I make myself very clear. I am not an educator. I disqualify myself as an educator. And that's the purpose of these visits. I've had the privilege, thanks to many of you in this room, to serve in the Tennessee General Assembly a number of years, and now serve as governor of Tennessee. You gave me that privilege by supporting me over the years, and I'm grateful for that. I've served under 4 governors, starting with the late Governor Buford Ellington, Dunn, Blanton, Alexander. Now, ladies and gentlemen, while I was a member of the General Assembly, I voted to increase taxes to reform education under Governor Dunn. I did it again under Governor Blanton, and again under Governor Alexander. And what we set out to do is to restructure education in Tennessee. We want to look at what we have today. We want to look at the costs that are involved today. You know, most of the time when we refer to the cost of education and what we're going to do in education, the reference is to those people in education, many times the classroom school teachers and administrators that we're all very proud of. But costs have gone up tremendously in education today, in areas that we never stop to think about. And I just have some numbers here from some neighboring counties, Wheatley, Henry, Old-Bama. When we look at restructuring, we're talking about transportation, that's busing, if you please. We're talking about the administration of education. We're talking about cost efficiencies in the public system we have today. And then we're talking about what we need to develop the 21st century classroom. Let me give you 2 examples. In transportation alone, in Henry County, in 1981, the state funded $154,000 to operate buses, and Henry County put $475,000 into their system. This year, in 1989, the state increased their funding $6,000, $154,000 in 8 years to $160,000. But Henry County had to increase theirs from $475,000 to $726,000. Which increased $251,000. I was told this morning when I left Nashville that the last gasoline Davidson County bought for their school system cost 63 cents a gallon, and the order they just bought cost 98 cents a gallon. These costs are uncontrollable so far as a local school system, county, or city is concerned. When I look at the administrative cost of education in the present system, we find a county system in West Tennessee that has $23.21 per student appropriation for administrative costs. And we have other systems in Tennessee that are as high as $200 per student for administrative costs. The average cost in Tennessee is about $53. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we want to do is look at the system we have today. Can you imagine how much the electrical bill has gone up just in this county for the electricity? We want to look at the cost that exists today. We've been able to improve classroom teacher salaries in the last 3 years. We need to continue with that improvement. And then we want to look at the classroom of tomorrow. And we want the input, and that's why we're here. I think we have visited now about 450 schools. We want the input of all the parents, teachers, administrators, and citizens into developing this program for the 21st century. But more than anything else, ladies and gentlemen, we want you to understand that we're just not going to have more of the same. We're going to restructure education in K through 12 and try to help K through 16 in Tennessee. Now let me reference back to my young days here when I was growing up right here in this county. We talk about mixed classes today. My classes were mixed, 1 through 6, all 6 of them, in a one-room school in Little Zion in the north part of this county. What they taught us and what they emphasized, and my teacher, my first grade teacher is still living in this county, Miss Valdez Summers. And what they emphasized back in those days was reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now, there's a difference in what we talked about arithmetic than arithmetic. And let me talk about that in just a few minutes. Let's talk about reading. When I grew up, what you needed to do was to be able to read the label on boxes. Probably more important was to be able to read the instructions on a sack of fertilizer. And that was reading. When you talked about writing, well, that was to write my name, Ned Ray McWherter, Dresden, Tennessee, Weakley County, or my neighbor's name, and be able to communicate by writing. Well, let's look at reading. Today, reading means that we've got to read programs for robots. And writing means, ladies and gentlemen, that we have to be able to have the ability to write those programs for robots and all the other technologies. We have to read and comprehend and understand what the technologies mean and what they do. And let me tell you a true story. It didn't happen here, but it happened over in Warren County in McMinnville. I was in a plant over there a few weeks ago dedicating a plant, and there was a tall, red-headed guy there with a little red mustache. Had a little red back here on his neck. It takes one to know one, you know. And I know him. And he was standing there with his hand up on a computer just punching away. And over here about 10 feet was a robotic welding machine, and it was just welding every which way in the world, moving in all directions, and he kept punching and punching. And I looked and I walked up to him and I said to him, how long have you been working here? He said, about 8 weeks ago. And I said, how long did it take you to learn how to operate this computer? And he said, 3 or 4 weeks. They taught me how. He just kept on talking to me and just knew what he was doing. And I looked at him and I said, well, how do you like this job? And he said, it beats the dickens out of heavy lifting. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. In this video, a few minutes ago, you saw a group of kids in McMinnville, Tennessee, that last year took Japanese via distant learning or satellite. Today, in McMinnville, Tennessee, Bridgestone Tire and Rubber Company from Tokyo, Japan, opened a $350 million business there making tires and hired 198 people, and they're going to 750. And these kids can communicate with those Japanese that come back and forth. Now, won't they have a better opportunity to get a good job in that plant than someone that can't communicate? We know they will. Now, let's talk about arithmetic. You know, Arithmetic in my day and some of your days would mean that you could add and divide and subtract and know the multiplication tables. Arithmetic has a different meaning today. Math today means algebra, trigonometry, equations, all different kinds of math. They're very important. So the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic become more important than ever. And they're more important for us to understand the new age and the requirement of the reading, writing, and arithmetic. When we developed this program, as Commissioner Smith told you, there have been 7 drafts, and we'll go into final form with the 8th draft. The one thing that we all agreed that we would request, and the one thing that we've learned from our business, is that we want the priorities placed in 3 areas. First, resources. Second, flexibility. And third, accountability. Now, what do we mean by those 3 criteria? Resources means textbooks, workbooks, and the tools that a classroom school teacher needs in the classroom in order for her to perform her teaching better. It means hopefully more or less, means less numbers in her classroom. We need to reduce the student-teacher ratio, and we need to continue to give attention to improving salaries to attract bright young men and women, as well as keep those we have today, but attract them for the future. Resources. Flexibility. What does that mean? Well, it's very simple. Over the years that we've continued to build on the education system and the references I made about reform education for the past 20 years under 3 or 4 different governors, what's happened to us is our education system has become overruled, overregulated, and overgoverned. And what we need to do is to eliminate those areas that are overruled, overregulated, and overgoverned. We need policies, broad policies from national. But we need to turn the system back over to the local community, right here in Weakley County, or in Martin, or in any other county or city, wherever the systems exist. And we need to let the local community, along with the parents, set more rules and regulations and have more input into the system and encourage you to do so. And the other area we need to address is today, in the 4th grade class in reading, we tell you from Nashville that a child should take reading 55 minutes a day, 5 minutes between classes, 55 minutes of math, 5 minutes, and 55 minutes of something else in 5 minutes. I believe that a child in the 4th grade reading class, that the classroom school teacher and the principal of that school should make that decision at the local level in that schoolhouse. If a child needs to take reading 2 hours a day until they learn how to read at the 4th grade level, that decision belongs being made there, not in the marble halls of the government. I could go on with flexibility, but let's talk about accountability. As was said earlier, we talked about tax and reform and tax and reform and tax and reform, and what we do is we spend the money as far as it'll go, and the next person gets elected and comes along and he starts out on another reform. And I voted for them, and I'm proud I did, because I believe that every one of them Dunn, Blanton, Alexander, and Ellington. I believe they made improvements in public education, and I'm proud of the system, as I told you. But ladies and gentlemen, when we start to restructure, we want to make a commitment. First of all, as I explained in the opening remarks, go through the costs that we have today, try to reduce those. And then if it takes additional funding, and we ask for additional funding, and I've said, ladies and gentlemen, if it takes additional funding, I will ask for it. But I want you to understand that if we do that, I want any revenues dedicated to education. No longer do I want to see revenues increased in the name of improving education, and those dollars be spent in prisons or any other department of state government. It should go to education. Should be an educated thing. In developing this program, we need, and we are, and we will, develop a vehicle to measure accountability. And that vehicle will tell you and every citizen in this state, and I'm a citizen as well. And let me tell you, I'm a little wore out with tax and tax and tax and reform and reform and reform. All of us are tired of that. That's why we need to understand. I repeat that word again. But ladies and gentlemen, we need to be able to have the accountability to tell that when a child goes from the 5th grade to the 6th grade, we can identify the education added to that child. We need to identify the value of education added from grade to grade to grade to grade as they move through the system. And we should ask for that. And we should receive that. Now, when you talk to a group of teachers and principals and those that are out there involved in the classroom every day, what they will in turn say to you, will you give me those resources that you talk about, Governor, and you give me the flexibility and let me have more input and let me take these little Johnnies and Marys and James and Toms and let me teach them. And Mr. Governor, we'll give you the accountability and we'll lead this Southeast and we'll lead this country in an education system. And ladies and gentlemen, after going to see the classroom teachers in the schools across this state, if we give them a reasonable and responsible and an adequate level of funding for the poor kids, just like the rich kids, poor communities and counties like the rich counties, black kids or white kids, I've got confidence and I understand the need and I believe they will do that. Because I think they want to. I think we have the most dedicated group of educators that you would find in any business or any industry, anywhere, at any time. So that's what we're here to talk about, and that's what we're talking about. And I'm proud you're here, and I just want to say to you in closing, again, ladies and gentlemen, I guess I have a personal interest in this program. I knew what I wanted to do when I got elected governor. I have watched governors try to do everything. You can't do that. I knew I wanted to develop a road program and a health care program and a housing program. I knew the first 2 or 3 years that we would not ask for any tax increase and we would get a minimum starting salary for all the classroom teachers in excess of $18,500 in every schoolhouse in this state. And I knew we wanted to try to start a program to improve our environment and clean up our rivers. That's important to our quality of life. More than anything else, I knew we wanted to build an economy through a 95 county jobs program, and we've been able to do that. In 1987, when I went into office, 41 of our 95 counties had 10% or more unemployment for 10 years. First of this month, we had that down to 5 counties. Our unemployment rate last month was 5%, lower than the southeastern average and lower than the national average. Our infant mortality rate is on a decrease for the first time in a long time in this state because of our concentration in health care on mamas and babies and senior citizens. Our housing program is moving forward now. Our road program, I dedicated an opening here 2 or 3 days ago in this area. We're building roads all over this state. We're opening up communities, improving the quality of life. But let me say this to you. When I grew up here in this county, and I've told this story across the state, I attended the public school system in this county, got out and went to work in a factory. I worked hard. My mother and daddy were proud but poor, and I'm proud of that. I worked hard, and I made it. Good luck, a little of God's help. I've got places on my elbows and my knees right now that I can show you scars from picking strawberries, cotton, right alongside my mother when I was a kid, growing up here and going to high school. I washed dishes in a restaurant. But I visited my 2 grandchildren today, one son and his friends in the 1st grade, one grandson in the 4th grade. And let me tell you, and this is just as honest and as plain as I can tell you, they can't make it like I did. This world is different, and this world is changing. And my grandkids and your children and the children of tomorrow and those that are yet unborn in Wheatley County and every other county in this state and across this country are going to absolutely have to have a 21st century classroom to give them the education and teach them the knowledge and the skills that will be required for the jobs of the future. So I close tonight in asking you to understand. I did not come to ask you for taxes or revenue or any members of the General Assembly. Understand what we're trying to do. Understand the need. And that if you believe in it, then I believe that we'll be able to implement it. And if it costs money, I believe we can afford it and we'll fund it. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the comments of Governor Ned McWherter as he addresses educators along with politicians and interested individuals from throughout Northwest Tennessee. That took place last Monday night. That was the governor's address on the 21st Century Classroom program as the governor attempts to improve education here. Governor Ned McWherter speaking on the campus of the University of Tennessee at Martin Monday night. And we hope you've enjoyed the governor's address, and we hope you've enjoyed today's 30 Minutes program. This is Paul Tinkle, pre-recorded. Thank you for listening to WCMT.
You've been listening to 30 Minutes, a community affairs program on Thunderbolt Radio. You can listen to this broadcast and others anytime by visiting thunderboltradio.com and following the Thunderbolt Radio and Digital YouTube page. Thanks for listening.